An Assyrian relic. Found winged bull 5 meters by 5, face turning sideways, good condition. Stop. Shipping possible, month may only. Stop. Cost transportation about $10,000. Stop. Division April 26. Stop. Shall we ask for bull? Dr. Edward Kiera, Expedition Field Director. In early April 1929, workmen excavating outside what would later prove to be the throne room of the Assyrian king Sargon II at Khorsabad, an Iraqi village standing on the ruins of Dur Sharukin, 33 degrees 20 minutes north, 44 degrees 30 minutes east, uncovered fragments of a colossal relic, an implement of desert warfare particularly designed for the dust swamp of Mesopotamia, the Zerodrome, where war machines take on bizarre forms and tactics, even if those tactics include sporulation or evaporation into resistant dust spores, as a way to endure such harsh environmental conditions. Since in this dust swamp all conventional modes of military survival are destined to become extinct, and all tactical dynamisms are easily dehydrated, melted away, or evaporated without a trace, war machines must camouflage themselves within much more resistant and elusive entities. These war machines are consequently stealthy enough to breach any type of defensive security, and to diffuse through different modes of existence, belonging simultaneously to the heterogeneous occult and monotheism, to war and peace, in the service both of the state's military formation and of insurgent forces which know no boundaries. Such a diffusion results in the forging of vectors of epidemic dispersion. A war machine undertaking such diffusions or terminal multiplicities can be identified as an accultural, military, religious, and political entity all at once, operating as a machine both of utter eradication or revolution and of sabotage or insurgency. Such a war machine's every movement is like an epidemic wave, encroaching upon all aspects of life: food chain, infrastructure, population, politics, trade, and the overall dynamism of events. Like other Mesopotamian or Middle Eastern war machines, which are always ready to adopt new forms in new environments and are able to adopt different tactics in favor of different political and military entities, the excavated relic was an entity militarized in sinister fashion in all directions, an occult drone capable of marching forward, flying and guarding motionless, all at the same time. A perfect exemplar of occult warfare. The inscriptions and tablets suggested that the name of this military beast was Lamassu, Shidu Lamassu, or Lamassu, the evil repellent one, sometimes also known as the Last Guardian, is a winged bull or lion with a human head, usually depicted with 5 legs, to indicate quadrupedalic movement. Lamassus belong to the Neo-Assyrian era known as Sargonian. They are frequently associated with the occultural politics of evil against evil, the Exorcist's main theme, mainly developed by the war-crazed Assyrians, Lulubis, and certain elements of the Phoenicians, in which war is believed to have an un-life of its own, breeding war machines in order eventually to hunt them down. The essential irony, according to this Assyrian axis of evil against evil, is that war machines seek to survive each other, or in other words, they engage with and hunt each other, but they never know that war itself nurtures war machines only to snuff them out. The sublime truth of war is expressed not by what happens between war machines, but by that which transpires between war machines and war, and which entails the extinction of war machines once and for all. The Sardian conspiracy of war stands against every tactically driven regulation of war machines inspired by an individual or collective impetus to survival. Only by devouring all war machines, regardless of their ferocity or adaptability, does war reach a terminal plane of autonomy out of which pure strategy rises as the ultimate ethics of war. The ethics of war is only attainable when the tactics associated with war machines reach a malignant multiplicity, for which both the designatory plane of tactics and the line of command become redundant. The dissolution of war machines through their terminal tactical multiplicity signals the awakening of war as an autonomous strategy. If strategy is indifferent to the purpose of war machines and tactical determination, it is because the domain of strategy is exterior to that of tactics, which is in fact the war machine itself. Strategy resides outside of war machines, but inside of war. It pursues war by any means possible. Strategy grasps war outside of the tactical requirements peculiar to war machines, and by doing so, it exposes the exteriority of war to the war machine and its tactics. Likewise, the unlife of war maintains its radical outsideness by turning the tactics of war machines into pure strategy. External to tactical manipulations and the governing lines of command, strategy is diagrammed by intrinsic escape from those military configurations which simultaneously provide war machines with survival and destruction. Evidently, then, war is not the consequence of conflicting war machines. The unlife of war is autonomous, but it spawns war machines only so as eventually to devour them. Grasping this pseudo-conspiracy of war, the ancient Mesopotamian war machines engineered the axis of evil against evil, a theoretical and pragmatic doctrine for participating with the unlife of war. The axis was constituted out of military techniques corresponding with the strategic plane of war rather than with the regulation and tactical dynamism of war machines. The Assyrians practiced the doctrine of evil against evil so as to combine all aspects of being into an autonomous military machine characterized by an autophagic ferocity. According to the axis of evil against evil, the first task of war machines is to perceive war not as a consequence of collisions between war machines or crisscrossing lines of tactics, but as an autonomous machine spawning war machines in order to hunt them down. War uses its own weapons against war machines in the same way that war machines employ their weapons against each other. Assyrian military scriptures frequently refer to these weapons and implements of war as in contrast to the military weapons of war machines. Throughout the scriptures, these weapons are alluded to as a fog of war, strategies and dracospiral pathways upon which war machines are gradually but subtly devoured, eaten away by war. In one such scripture, Lamassu is hailed as the first military invention to venerate war as being external to the logics, existence, and activities of war machines. According to the Assyrian axis of evil against evil, war spreads over deep occultural agitations, Tellurian dynamics, heretical insurgencies, and outsiders. The truth of war lies beyond the battlefield. Aramaic shibboleth inscribed on the Lamassu discovered at Khorsabad. Parsani notes that, for the Assyrians, war hunts war machines rather than war machines hunting each other. War is fueled by terminal fusions of strategy and tactical multiplicities. Everything that emerges from war is a devastating disruption for the configurations, guiding systems, and probe functions of war machines. According to the occultural and military doctrine of evil against evil, war produces too much heat for war machines to bear, to the degree that they begin gradually to melt, tactical meltdown, precipitating a molecular breakdown into diabolical particles. The Assyrians suspected that Mesopotamia was swarming with these diabolical particles, the demonically lingering remnants of war machines. Tactically dead but strategically reanimated and introduced to the battlefield, this molecular debris left behind by melting war machines was frequently referred to as the fog of war. In Assyrian military doctrines, war machines are always incinerated and consumed by war. The process of immolation is gradual and twisted, but the return path to life is abrupt and is never recorded. For war resurrects the disintegrated war machines and brings them back to life from the other side of the battlefield in the form of a Cimmerian haze, the fog of war. The Assyrians believed that these particles, or necrospores of dead war machines, haunted every aspect of Middle Eastern life on behalf of war. These particles were generally understood to be a demonic dust, a cloud of spores or dry spirits capable of possessing military programs, political systems, and people. Assyrians alluded to them as relics or diabolical things, more radically warlike than war machines themselves. It was mainly through the axis of evil against evil as an occultural and political vehicle that the doctrine of autonomous war impregnated Zoroastrianism, the germ cell of Abrahamic monotheism. Later on, the axis was vigorously unfolded through Islam's military omega of jihad known as Qiyamah, or Islamic apocalypse. In Kiyama, every war machine must burn, and all modes of military survival, whether belonging to the state or to nomadic insurgencies, must be consumed by the unlife of war. The axis of evil against evil is a politics of endurance in war, but one that resists any form of attunement to or economical appropriation by the survival impetus of war machines. For war machines, survival-oriented regulations are not limited to the act of surviving. They also drive war machines to move and to kill. The axis sought to breed and simulate war machines corresponding to the machinic particles and weapons that war employs to hunt war machines. For this reason, the doctrine of evil against evil developed models of terminal fusion between tactics and strategy, with the aim of attaining autonomy and pragmatic multiplicity, delineated by smooth operational cutting edges, cryptogenic emergence, tracelessness, omnipresence, multifunctionality, and the ability to cross incompatible dimensions, traversing new territories to accomplish their tasks. In short, the Assyrian axis was supposed to engineer war machines corresponding to the unlife of war itself, if only as faint terrestrial echoes of its unlimited ferocity. The Assyrians understood that the tactical knowledge of their war machines must nourish itself on the axis of evil against evil, the paramilitary doctrine which perceives war as being independent of war machines. War has terminal occultural tendencies for hunting war machines of all kinds. The Assyrians realized that in order to protect the state from the inevitable internal insurrections, organizational corruptions, and incursions from the outside, they had to engender war machines conforming to the autonomous tendencies of war. However, according to Parsani, the Assyrians' fatal mistake was to ignore the fact that those war machines which achieve autonomy and are fueled by the fusion of tactics and strategy will eventually turn into disloyal agents or double dealers, trisonomic dissenters. Such war machines gnaw at the roots of the state's foundation on all fronts, corroding it, becoming invisible gates between the state and the unlife of war. The task of the Assyrian paramilitary behemoth was to breed unheard-of war machines capable of roaming freely beyond the borders of the state, security leaks which do not open the state to its enemies, but to that which knows nothing of territory, survival, or even nomad war machines. A state protected and secured by such intrinsically elusive war machines no longer answers to Deleuze and Guattari's characterization of the state. Lamassus, also known as the last guardians, are always found in pairs at the border of Assyrian palaces, gates, and the entrances leading to the most sacred temples. Lamassus watch what comes in but not what goes out. Viewed from the front, they stand firmly in place. Seen from the side, their winged bodies appear to stride forward on a peculiar complement of 5 legs each, indicating the marching movement of a quadrupedal beast. Lamassu is a desert hunter. It takes flight so as to chase pests descending from the sky. It is a weapon enveloping diverse tactical lines and instruments of battle. Lamassus are capable of crossing over into fundamentally different planes or dimensions all at once. They attack, defend, hunt, and scheme. Standing still at the gates, they can yet be present everywhere, at the threshold of the outside and at the outer limits of the state. For this reason, Lamassus are usually identified by their transient omnipresence inside and outside the battlefield. The Babylonians called the Assyrians' bizarre obsession with these creatures Lamassu complex, in an allusion to the belief that war has a life of its own. H. Parsani. The following section is a distorted part of the original report presented to Delta Force's Special Division, OBI Iteration Unit, possibly derived from Obi, Bai, Sorcery and Obliteration, but the first 3 capital letters suggest an acronym, making this interpretation problematic. The report was made by former infantry Colonel Jackson West. Upon securing the archaeological site of Nippur, Iraq, 32 degrees, 10 minutes north, 45 degrees, 11 minutes east. The archaeological site was covertly secured by conducting a distracting shock and awe operation called Ready for CNN Hajj, carried out by the spectacular black CARC helicopters of the U.S. 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Later, a section of the report was leaked to the public by Jackson West, who had unexpectedly deserted Delta Force. The information leak was later confirmed by a Delta Force security spokesman. This version of the report was presumably rewritten by someone other than West himself, recomposed a number of times, possibly as a result of multiple oral transcriptions. For this reason, the hypostician team decided to revise and edit the entire text. The report bears a striking resemblance to a short essay written by Dr. Hamid Parsani on a military manuscript discovered in 1986 at Shadupam, located at Tel Harmel, which apparently means place of writing, 33 degrees 22 minutes north, 44 degrees 28 minutes east, along with scripts on mathematics, mesomath, botany, ancient warfare, religion, and various lexicons. In that essay, Parsani offers a detailed discussion of a cryptogenic Assyrian military experiment in occult weaponry, which eventually led to the total eradication of the Assyrian civilization in the summer of 612 BC. Parsani nominates this occultural meltdown Assyrian syndrome, possibly an anti-monotheistic, devoid of Yahweh's jealousy and its consequent victimhood, and political nomenclature after Nahum's The Burden of Nineveh. This is part of the report as edited by the hypostician team. The most terrible assaults are those carried out by occult particles. They called them demons or agents from the other side, as well as the diabolical undertides of war itself. Lamassus were revered as the most militantly efficient and tenacious guardians against intruders, occultural saboteurs, and violating sorcerous forces in particular. Lamassus are always twosome, and hence more than one, but essentially less than the multiplicity of lurking barbarians, desert Tartars, and the Golden Horde. More than one and less than many, Lamassus are always duplicitous in every sense. These numeric behemoths share more with the numerical sorcery of capitalism than one can imagine. Moving toward ambiguous but efficient numbers, twinness and duplicity are spontaneous numeric military units. They effectively combine the fluidity of the many and the military precision of one. Undoubtedly, Lamassu formulates the principle of dyadic glory. The towering towers of capitalism come in twos. Lamassus undertake a strategic course of action, engineered by terminal fusions of tactics and strategy, to defend the state against occultural particles and unheard-of enemies. Assyrians believed that the most terrible warriors of their empire were not their human berserkers, but Lamassus. Bound to state militarization on one side, but autonomous on the other, Lamassus operate on behalf of both the state's occultural programs and occultural entities of the outside. They erode the borders of the state, its horizon and its gates. From those obscure regions between the inner and the outer, where blurring of the boundaries proceeds at a drastic rate, the regions occupied by Lamassus harbor such violent conflicts between the occultural entities of the state and the outside that conflictual communication is replaced by contamination, and the climax of victory or defeat is succeeded by the swash-backwash waves of epidemics. These regions gradually turn into zones of overwhelming occultural traffic, full of the potential to erode the state and its neighboring geopolitical environment. In the presence of occult entities such as Lamassu and other repellents, the state's border is reinvented as a field of vortices, unloading occultural heterogeneities into the state, resulting in 1. Corrosion as a result of the difference between internal violent fissions associated with divergent occultural lines, tending to propagate in all directions, and the gravitational pull of the state's core, which tends to converge all activities according to itself. 2. Dissemination of insurgent crowds as the consequence of violent internal fissions. Minority engineering leads to minority militarism, critically disturbing the cohesion of territorial functions and the state's programs. 3. Inflammation of regions already damaged by the systematic failures inherent to organizations and boundaries. These regions are always either the first territories of the empire to be torn apart or the first places to be invaded by external forces. 4. Rise of parasitical modes of organizational poverty. The state's political programs, responsible for reinforcing and integrating the system, gradually begin to diverge and deteriorate under the influence of occult political pollution. This political pollution is the result of contamination by occultural tendencies which are external to the original programming and the intention of the state's politics. Eventually, the state's political lines lose any capacity to reinforce the system, either economically or politically. 5. Finally, implosion of the state, usually coinciding with an invasion from the outside. For the forces of the outside are always lying in wait, ready to launch an ambush when borders collapse or are perforated, lurking, ready to rush in. At the time of the Assyrian cultural meltdown, foreigners flooded down from the mountains and consumed what had already been eaten from the inside. The invincible empire was devoured by outsiders in a matter of days. Assyria will fall by the sword that is not of man. A sword not of mortals will devour them. Isaiah 31:8. Colonel West ends the report with the following sermon. War on terror is riddled with dusty ancient crypts saturated with occult geometries. Our decadent intelligence systems, our artless principles of warfare can never exhume these crypts, from which the other side of the battle digs out its untimely war machines and offbeat tactics. Their war machines do not belong to the time we know, the time in which our civilizations were built. We find ourselves constrained to fight in their time, according to geometries which are utterly alien to us. Our exposure to this alien time carries the risk of chronic side effects, or something even worse, something irrecoverable and beyond our bloodiest dreams of frenzy, smoke and ash. Note: there was a woman lying on her back next to the truck, a middle-aged woman with a sunburnt skin, eyes gouged out and filled with semen. It was more exquisite than the white eyes of an epileptic. I named her Moby Dick. Jackson West's Journal, entry date December 4th, 1993, end note. Which in comparison will come to seem like the harmless daydreams of unsophisticated, naive innocence. With the fury of my terrible weapons, Tiglath-Pileser I, Assyrian king circa 1110 BC, from a tablet discovered beneath the gate at the entrance of Sennacherib Palace, guarded by 2 lamassus. The manipulative policies of the state exploit occultism either as a repressive tool and a substitute for rigorous politics, the occult as a dummy politics, or as a means to repel outsiders, xeno-agents, their principles and influences. But once these political tendencies are undermined and derailed, the occult perforates the body of the state's politics, which, decaying, can no longer hold at bay the outsiders and radical xeno-particles whose functioning is external to the survival of the state. In the wake of this political cataclysm, every program, every manipulative policy mutates into tentacles of communication spreading deep throughout the untrodden abyss of the outside. The state's occult entities will eventually attain autonomy as a result of such constant communication with xeno-agents. Avatars of the outside awaken the insurgent potentials inherent to the state's occult entities. Correspondingly, the rise of autonomous entities within the state contributes to the emergence of anomalies. The more autonomous processes emerge within the state, the more anomalous the state becomes. If occultism propagates itself only by eating itself, then once the state's politics is contaminated by the autonomous occult, its too will become autophagic by nature. By fatally overexposing themselves to horizons from beyond, the state's occultural agents gradually construct bridges and unlock gates between the borders of the state and occult entities of the outside. This panorama of emerging duplicity is anticipated by pulp horror's obsession with the spontaneous disorders caused by occultural guardians, rebel lamassus, and independent scarecrows hunting farmers and desolate lands with a passion. Such narratives of insurgency recall the Catholic obsession with gargoyles. Pulp horror quite rightly detects an ominous tendency of the state towards the employment of hyperstitional and occultural agents. As soon as gargoyles become fully active on an autonomous level, fusing with intrusive outsiders and contaminated by alien particles, they come out of their petrified state. They begin to feast on everything that remains inside, the walls and empty aisles. They melt into pillars, infesting them stone by stone, deeply embedding the architecture of the holy place with their own chemistry. Such ostensibly instrumentalized occultural agents betray their host more virulently and ferociously when they are directly exposed to war and its deep occultural tendencies. These renegade agents possess both the schizo-strategic creativity of sorcerous politics and the state's perverse taste for manipulation and radical abuse. In occult warfare, a lamassu becomes as one with the attackers, operating externally to the state's mechanisms, making the state prone not to any particular occult entities, but to an outside coming forth from the inside. Such is the black epic brewed up by the Mesopotamian axis of evil against evil.